we talked about the father, and now we'll talk about the son. This one has, it's a larger, it's a bigger PowerPoint presentation because he built a lot. And I made efforts actually to not continue until now, at this very moment, to add new pictures. So you see, he lived only 51 years. He died in 1961. So Eero Saarinen was born on August 20th, on the birthday of his father, was a Finnish-American architect and industrial designer noted for his wide-ranging array of designs for buildings and monuments. Saarinen is best known for designing the Washington Dulles. If Bruce is still here, I would ask him what is the correct pronunciation of this word.
Dulles.
Pardon?
Dulles.
Dulles? Yeah, okay.
It's amazing building.
Yes, it is. The international airport outside Washington, the TWA Flight Center in New York City, and the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri. With the Gateway Arch, I have a story to tell. He was the son of noted Finnish architect Eero Saarinen, so now we know about the two Saarinens. This is the gentleman, a very versatile architect and very talented, it was a great loss that he died young. I imagine he would have lived at least 30 years more. He would have built, I mean, they continued to build based on his designs after he died, but like the Athens airport in Greece, but even the Dulles airport was built, was finished after he died. Anyway, he was also the Eero Saarinen was the main juror, the chief of the jury for the opera in Sydney. And I said this story before, but I will repeat it now because I think it's important. Because the opera in Sydney is a paradigmatic building of the second half of the 20th century and in general of modern architecture. And it's inconceivable Sydney without its opera. So the story is like this, and I will be short. John Utzon sent his project, the Danish architect sent his project to Sydney. It was a competition. But Saarinen arrived in Sydney one day after the jurying was supposed to begin. There was a problem with the plane, so he arrived one day later. In the meantime, the other jurors, members of the jury, discarded already the project by John Utzon. They looked at it, they were not convinced by it because John Utzon didn't show many details. His proposal looked, a little sloppy in terms of, he probably didn't respect some requirements. I don't know. It was discarded, the project. Saarinen arrives in Sydney the next day and having, seriousness and being a scrupulous member of the jury, he was the chief, in fact, wanted to see the already, banished or excluded projects. And when he arrived at the project by Utzon, at that time he was building the TWA airport on JFK in New York. And there was a certain similarity, and you'll see that similarity when we arrive at the specific project by Saarinen. And being in the position he was in, meaning he was leading that group of jurors, he was able to convince everybody that that was the building that was supposed to win. And this is how John Utzon won. So I am telling this story because on one hand, I want to show, to say that evaluations in architecture are always, at least in part, subjective. It's impossible to be totally objective because one is a minimalist and the other one is a Rococo architect. And the Rococo architect doesn't like minimalism and the minimalist doesn't like Rococo, but it doesn't mean that there are no great architectures that are either minimalist or Rococo. For example, I saw once 1,000, well, there was a competition in Japan with two jurors, Tadao Ando and Jean Nouvel. And we cannot accuse them as being, superficial architects. But Tadao Ando chose 10 projects and Jean Nouvel chose 10 projects, and they didn't choose out of 1,000 projects, not even one, both of them. So the selection by Tadao Ando had nothing to do with the selection by Jean Nouvel. This shows clearly that, they were both very serious architects, but they had different tastes. So this is a problem. What do you do in schools when, one professor likes a project and another project likes another professor likes another project. So, the grades and the evaluations are at least in part subjective. If Saarinen was not the chief juror of that jury, Sydney would not have had the building that it has now, which is the glory of Sydney. Yes, it had problems when it was built, it was expensive, but it is a glorious building and it gives identity to Sydney. So you see, it's also about chains, accidents, chains, again, if it wasn't Saarinen and was another architect, Sydney would have had a different building as its opera. Anyway, he was also a very skillful designer. He designed furniture, and you will see a few chairs by him. Very versatile architect. A few drawings. This is a sports arena, which is beautiful. And it almost has something mythological about it. It's an architectonic animal, also with some mythology, and that longing of that, and the structure becomes myth somehow. I like this building very much. We'll arrive at it in detail. This is a sketch for the TWA. The word airport is not probably the correct one. Maybe Bruce can help me if he's still here. Because this building is part of the JFK airport in New York, but it's just I cannot call it a station. I should stop, making presentations in English. Okay, this is a sketch for the airport in Athens, which was built after he died. And this is a collage with his proposal for the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. Now, I think we talked about this because he worked on it together with his father. Then the Swedish theater, which also he worked with his father, as you can see, with Eero Saarinen. It was a remodeling of an existing building. It's a great chance, to have your father, an accomplished architect who also received commissions, and you learn a lot working together with your father. But sometimes there could be also tensions because, yes, there is a difference in age, and, sometimes between the father and the son, there could be also, as I said, tensions, and it's enough to think about the brothers Karamazov. But let's hope, the tensions do not arrive at what was arrived at in the brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. Okay, so now we see a community center from 1937, again with his father. You might say that here there is a slight, or maybe not so slight, influence of Frank Lloyd Wright on them to an extent. It's a moderate building. It's modern, but it's, maybe it's not sufficiently spectacular, but maybe that's not necessarily bad. Not every building is supposed to be so-called spectacular. This is the first building that he designed by himself. The Spencer House is not a glorious house. It wouldn't announce, it wouldn't announce the great architect that he became, but it was his first building built just by himself without his father. And as unglorious as the building is, so are the pictures. Maybe the building is better, I hope, than the pictures. This is another building he designed with his father. Looks rather, banal. Then another house, modernistic kind of, and it could have been also, considering its dimensions, a small school or a kindergarten, but it's a private residence. The trees are beautiful, and inside this looks cozy and comfortable. Anyway, another building which you already saw, the music hall in Buffalo, which he worked on with his father. We saw this one. I will not insist on this. Then this one also we saw when we talked about his father in Winnetka. Soon we'll just see his own works. This is a music center that we already looked at when we talked about his father. And now a house, I don't have, well, this picture from above, it is as it is, but I have some other pictures also from the inside. He's becoming increasingly modernistic, as you can tell, and maybe it's not yet very impressive, but will arrive there. Then a grasshopper, interestingly that he called it a grasshopper chair, from 1946. It was designed for Nolan Associates, a great manufacturer or distributor of high-end designs for furniture. These are the two pieces designed by Saarinen under this name, grasshopper chair. I think they're nice, especially the bigger piece. This one. Okay, now this one that we also saw when we talked about Saarinen, and I will not insist. Another chair from 1950. I only have this picture, and he also has the womb chairs. I hope, yeah, the womb chair and ottoman from 1946, 1948, also designed for Knoll Associates. I think Saarinen had a liking for comfort, because they seem to be comfortable. Anyway, mid-century designs, but he was an excellent designer, and tomorrow we'll talk about another excellent designer who also designed great chairs, and that is Charles Eames and his wife. Now, this church that we saw already with his father, he designed it with his father. It's hard to know. Maybe the son was beginning to influence his father, because you see the language is becoming more and more abstracted and is simplified, as opposed to early works by Eliel Saarinen and his father. Now we arrive at this work, and I have something to say about this work. This work was supposed to celebrate, so it was from 1947, immediately after the Second World War. And, it's some kind of a gateway towards West. It's the triumphalist gesture of, I would say, maybe I'm not totally wrong if I say the white man advancing westwards in the United States. And strangely, perhaps, despite this grandiose architectonic gesture, St. Louis was for years the crime capital of the United States. And so this gateway doesn't say anything about the darker side of St. Louis. Maybe at the time when it was built, there was no dark side. I hope not. But in the present, St. Louis for several years in a row was the crime capital of the United States. And because I know how ugly, well, crime is ugly everywhere in the world, but I know how it is in Chicago. I know that South Chicago every day around 5 people die because of guns, because of shootings. So crime is a big problem. And as I said, St. Louis was the capital and maybe still is the capital of crime. So I launched a competition some years ago called the House of Crime. And it was meant to be here, to assume this luminous Apollonian gateway to the West, the Arch by Sullivan. And I'll show you, I showed this before, but I'll show it again, a project by an Egyptian architect which tried to express the ugly side of what appears to be exclusively beautiful. So this is the luminous, highly optimistic, architectonic expression of the advancement of the white man towards West. But the monsters of the beasts within human existence were not addressed at all. And when you think about St. Louis being the crime capital of the United States, it's difficult to accept the ideology of this arch. Anyway, and you'll see now what Shahira Hamad did. So this is I like this picture very much, because this is a huge arch, and how it was built, and in terms of engineering, it is a marvel. But in terms of its, telling the truth, maybe even for its time didn't quite tell the truth. It's excessively, I think, optimistic and luminous. Anyway, now you see the House of Crime, which in the competition, I asked the competitors to envision the proposal in connection with this arch. And you'll see what Shahira Hamad did. She's a young Egyptian American architect. She's now in New York, living and working there. She was actually born in the States, but she was Egyptian. Her parents were doing the PhDs in dentistry in the States, so that's where she was born. This is what she did, and she worked with 3D Max. So she tried to sabotage the luminousness of the arch with a structure that showed conflict and tension, and maybe even some kind of, I hesitate to use this word, ugliness. So it's like a parasite, a beast that tries to evoke what the arch doesn't say, that it is a dark side of human life which must be acknowledged and expressed. Otherwise, perhaps it would develop even further. So this is what she created. And I actually think she did a good job, because the arch by itself for me is not telling the whole truth. Not the truth of St. Louis, that is. So this is what a young architect who knew how to work with 3D Max was willing and able to do. Anyway, she came 3 years ago or 2 years ago to Vienna, and she taught Maya to the students that I brought with me, or I invited to Vienna in that year. She taught them Maya, yes. The real way, not the way it is taught in school, unfortunately. Anyway, now the General Motors Technical Center from Warren, Michigan, 1948, 1956. Many of the buildings by, especially Eero Saarinen, are designated National Historic Landmarks, which is a great honor, and really many of his buildings have this status. Now, this is the country of automobiles, and it's almost like the temple of the automobiles here. Outside is a very prismatic building. It's a prism, international style. But you'll see that Saarinen had two sides. On one hand, he was working within the language of international style, and on the other hand, he worked almost organically. Now, a house for his mother, after his father died in 1950, he built this house for his mother, the widowed mother, a modern house through and through, in a beautiful landscape. Now, Union Bank and Trust in Columbus, this is also a good building, and it's also, I think, yes, a National Historic Landmark designated in 2000s. So a 70 years old building, but you'll see, you already see it's a clearly modernistic gesture, and the cars showed that, you know, the time when the photograph was taken, but the building, it's still, at least seen from above, you know, very interesting and contemporary. But even inside, you know, it's interesting, you know, this the way he brings light into the office. Okay, now Massachusetts Institute of Technology buildings in Cambridge. It's a chapel that he built, and he built 2 or 3. They are very well done. This is at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and I think it's more interesting than, well, I shouldn't say so, but I had in mind what Miss van der Rohe did on the campus of IIT, Illinois Institute of Technology. This is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. This is the chapel. And I think it's very convincing, both outside and inside. And look at this detail, you know, where the chapel touches the ground outside. I think it's very nice. And look at the treatment of the brickwork. You know, it reminds me of Plečnik a little bit in Vienna or Ljubljana. This is a way of, you know, bringing some impressionism into the brickwork, which otherwise could be maybe a little too smooth or sleek. It's a good building, and inside, you know, it's what it should be. It's a chapel. The University of Michigan School of Music in Ann Arbor. There is a great university there. You can see his architectural language is you know, pendulating between various tendencies. So he's not dogmatic in his approach to architecture. Milwaukee County War Memorial. This is situated right next to the museum by Calatrava. I have seen this building, and I admired more the building by Saarinen than the building by Calatrava. This is by Saarinen. And you see in the lower right corner a fragment of the building by Calatrava. So they are practically next door neighbors, so to speak. You see here also Calatrava, the Calatrava building on the left in the background. The courtyard of the building by Saarinen, it has a good and interesting staircase, which I like. It's a view now from the staircase towards the courtyard. Now, another chapel at Stephens College in Columbia, College Columbia in Missouri. I don't know, this one is maybe a little bit too austere, the bottom at least. But there is a very fine, you know, ceiling inside, and you know, there is order, but there is also, you know, some kind of deviation from order through diagonals. So I think it's still a good building. Maybe not one of his best, but the best part is the ceiling and the roofing. And the solemnity or the solemn gathering of human beings getting married makes me smile a little bit. But considering that you know, a lot of marriages end up in divorce, not just in the States but all over the world, you wonder about these very solemn gatherings, you know. Anyway, let's hope that this pair achieves eternity. Uh, Now the Miller House, Columbus, Indiana, also designated a national. It's nice now when a modernistic building is designated a national historic landmark and it's not a public building, it's a house. Fine. And so what commission designed the house? Yeah, then this building was given to the Museum of Art, which did an extensive restoration. So it can be visited. So if you go to Columbus, you could visit this house, which now has a different owner, meaning the museum there. Anyway, the modernistic mid-century, you know, kind of, I mean, not kind of, modernistic mid-century building. The Concordia Senior College, now this is not really a college, it's a theological, it's actually a chapel. I don't know why it was called Senior College, maybe because it's part of a college. It's actually a chapel, and now it received this name, but initially was theological. And yeah, he knew how to do chapels, besides other things, industrial buildings and houses and furniture design. This is the pedestal series, another chair by Saarinen from 1957. Another house at Vassar College, a famous college on the east side of the United States. It's a good building, you know. It's a house, but it's actually a public house. It's you know, it's a public building. It's not a private residence. It has a very interesting windows. Unfortunately, I don't think I have very convincing, I mean, detailed pictures, but I should have, because the windows I like very much. They seem to have a complexity, and they give the character to the whole building. You can see, you can have an intuition of what I'm trying to say through words in this picture. Now, Chancellery, it's actually an embassy, the United States Embassy in Oslo, in Norway, from 1955. It's a triangular site. You know, it's an embassy. It's not very adventurous. Although there are embassies in Berlin, there are beautiful embassies in terms of architecture built by the Nordic countries. Very nice. So if you arrive in Berlin, let's hope the pandemic goes away and we can travel again. If you arrive in Berlin, please do not forget to visit the quarters, the embassy's quarter in Berlin, where the Nordic countries have some new buildings that are exceptional. So, but this is the building by Saarinen in Oslo. You know, in plan looks more interesting perhaps than in, you know, from the street. Anyway, it's an official building, but looking closer to it, there are interesting things happening here. So it's not as regular or banal as it might appear. Another embassy, this time in London. You can tell this gentleman receives commissions from the government that you know, are not to be ignored. You know, the embassy in Oslo, the embassy in London. This one was bought by Qatar. It was sold and bought by Qatar. You know. Anyway, at the time when the pictures were taken, it was still an embassy, as you can tell. I'm not very fond of these buildings. Now this one, yes, this building is one of those of his best buildings. I think it is a sports arena. It is part of the Yale University campus in New Haven, Connecticut. It's more than 60 years old, and I think it's very well done. It's modernistic. There is the expression of the structure, but then look at this part which advances towards the entrance. You know, it's almost like a bird in flight. It has something, and it is abstracted, but also there is a certain level of figuration. I have been here, and it's a very good building. So you see, he worked with rectangularity, but he was also able to work with fluidity quite well. And you'll see the TWA, again, I shouldn't say airport, but I don't have the other word that is probably more appropriate. Forgive me, I need training in English. Yeah, not an excellent picture of the inside. It's a little bit confusing because of the flags and other things, but I think if it could have been expressed better indoors, and maybe initially it was. But this is the building seen from above at the time when it was built. At around that time also Kenzo Tange built significantly in Tokyo for the Tokyo Olympics, much better than Ken Gokuma these days. It was a heroic period in the modern architecture when architects had the courage to, plus they associated themselves with brilliant engineers. So they engineered buildings that are still very, very impressive today. And you know, you would have thought this is by Zaha Hadid almost. Well, it's by Saarinen from 60 years ago. Anyway, the IBM manufacturing and training facility, you know, you wonder how could it be? This is an architect and this is another architect. No, it's the same architect. And this is almost really the purity is, and it's almost surreal. It has something of Kazuyo Sejima. You know, I'm thinking of the Louvre Museum that she built, not in Paris, of course. I forgot the name of, you know, it's like a branch, very fine building by Kazuyo Sejima and her partner. But this one is by Saarinen, and I think is excellent. You know, 1958, so 6 years ago in Rochester. I like the simplicity and look, the purity and also the colors. You know, you can do wonders even with in a rectangular form of architecture. There's nothing wrong with rectangularity. You can achieve architectural poetry. Now we arrive at the celebrated terminal. This is the word I was trying to find and I couldn't find. So it's the TWA terminal. The airline TWA does not exist any longer. But this was the terminal that he built in 1956, 1962. He died in 1961. So it was finished just after he died. And it was because of this that he was working on it that at that time, he judged the competition for the opera in Sydney. And you understand perhaps why he was so sensitive and affectionate towards the project by John Utzon. This is the building, you see. This is the building that he was erecting at that time. And this is a building almost, you know, a contemporary of at least the thought, the seed of the project by Utzon. And has a very, very, you know, fluid interior. Look at it. And he didn't use parametrics. There were no computers at the time. This was all manual work. And I don't have here, but I have in another presentation, working drawings for that desk, the reception desk. It's beautiful, you know, very sculptural and very fluid. And the building is indeed a bird in flight or ready to fly. the building still exists. I don't think it's still used as a terminal. I think it has a different function, but it doesn't matter. It's a good building. And it's very possible Calatrava found some inspiration in it, because obviously this building was built before any structure by Calatrava. He obviously had a vision, and this vision became reality when the building was built. I have been in this building when it was used as a terminal, and my memory is now maybe fading a little bit, but it is an impressive, it was and it is an impressive building. We are approaching the end of this presentation. Now a Hill College house. This is again used a house, but it's a public housing, you know, more moderate in architectural expression. But I like this detail, you know, where he's playful with the windows, and you know, the walls give the impression that they are very thick. And what I see here makes me remember what Louis Kahn said about the wall and the window in a wall. Louis Kahn said that in the Middle Ages, or you know, well, before modernity, or even before the Renaissance, the wall was very, very thick, and the window was a break in the wall, and because the wall was very, very thick, the light that enters through that opening in that interstitial space between the outside and the inside found its physicality in a way, light. But the more we progress towards modernity, the wall became thinner and thinner. And now what we do, we cover the windows with curtains, but it's not the same thing. And I think Kahn is right, it's not the same thing. When you have a wall that is very, very thin, and you try to create some kind of in-between, so to speak, by placing a curtain in front of the glass, is not the same thing with having a very thick wall, like the southern wall of Ronchamp by Le Corbusier, which is very, very thick, at times even maybe bigger than 2 meters in thickness. There, indeed, you feel that the light, when it touches and breaks through the wall, something happens in that transition between the outside and the inside. Now here is probably mimicked. I cannot imagine that the walls are as thick as they might appear from this detail of the facade. Okay, the IBM Research Center. You remember that building by his father, but he worked himself on this building, but not with this very modernistic you know, treatment of the facade. He works for some very powerful companies, you know, like IBM. Now, if it would have been a circle, we would have obtained almost what Sir Norman Foster did for the Apple headquarters, but it's not full circle. Anyway, interesting interiors. And now the Bell Telephone Corporate Laboratories from 1957. This was a period of great optimism. The United States was very powerful economically, and it was leading the world towards some kind of a new beginning after the deadly Second World War. So there was a lot of confidence in the world. But it didn't last for too long, because at the end of the 60s, the hippie movement came in, and the protests against the Vietnam War, and then, you know, rock and roll and so on. This building was abandoned. You see at the bottom of the right corner, abandoned America. Incredible, no? How could such a building be abandoned? Well, it was abandoned because this company probably, you know, relocated or ran out of business. I don't know. But it was not demolished, and it came back to life. You'll see an image with it. being saved, so to speak. But it's a great building. But look, even the greatest building, is subject to the capriciousness of weather, and the leaves fall into the center of the building. So do expect that sooner or later your building will suffer because of the passage of time. But it was cleaned up, and it seems that here it is in the process of being rented out again, and it was saved. Now, this is another very interesting building for a very successful company. I'm not very familiar. They did, I don't know, some kind of vehicles, industrial equipment, vehicles. I imagine a very powerful company, because their headquarters is, or this, yes, the administrative center is, in terms of architecture, I like it very much. And you'll see why. Yes, it's a modernistic, building with a structure expressed honestly towards the outside, but it was published extensively, in the 70s. It was a very well-known building, very publicized. He worked beautifully with steel, and you have here this almost rusted steel, but it was not curtain, and the almost oriental kind of landscaping around it. And I like this building very much. It's dark, it's metallic, it has structural authenticity, but not to the point of being just structure. It's nice also inside. I think this building is still fresh somehow. And there you see the equipment that this company built. The United States has such companies that produce all kinds of wonders, technological wonders, or vehicles. Interestingly, how he entered with the steel into the water, without thinking that you can tell already that the water is not giving a peace of mind to the steel. No way. I love this picture. Here is a small architectonic sonata in steel, which even as a photograph is, I think, impressive. Okay, now we arrive at another college in New Haven, part of Yale. He worked there for several projects. And I didn't find quite the right pictures, but you can still have an idea. You see the medieval side of the modernist Saarinen, or maybe his Finnish nostalgias, because he was the son of Eero Saarinen, who worked with, towers like this. I don't know if that tower is by Saarinen actually, but this, these more horizontal buildings are by him. And I have a feeling that he was very fond of and very anchored in being a Finn, although he was born in the States. Now, this is, of course, a university campus, very, affluent, and they were able to commission architects like Saarinen. But I think it's a good part of the campus. Okay, and now the Dulles International Airport in Virginia, and this was finalized, was built after his death. He died in 1961. So you see the airport was finished in 1963. An international airport. I did myself once a project not far away from this, a center for high technology. If I find the pictures, I can show them to you. For a competition, which I didn't win. I hope you didn't imagine that you would have asked me, well, where is your tower? We don't see it in this picture, because that tower was built by Saarinen. Anyway, yes, another good building by Saarinen. he was able to design everything from chairs to airports and everything in between. An impressive structure. Okay, and now we arrive at a building in New York, the Vivian Beaumont. There are two more buildings that I'm going to show. The Vivian Beaumont Repertory Theatre at Lincoln Center. It is not as spectacular as other buildings there. Now my dealer as Cofidio, for example, but it was built at a different time. You know, resolutely modern with a structure maybe a little bit inspired by the museum in Berlin by Mies van der Rohe. Okay, still functioning. Now a church in Indiana that is, you know, not bad. I particularly like the drawings and again, the ceiling or the roof seen from within the church. He had futuristic visions about churches and chapels. So this is the plan, and this is actually part of a book, the plans and the sections of the chapel. Yeah, I like this part because it's more mysterious. There was another picture, but I guess I decided not to show it. Now, this is one of the, in my opinion, one of the best skyscrapers in New York City. Built 60 years ago, 55 years ago, the CBS building. I have seen this building, and at the time when I saw it, I didn't know it was built by Saarinen. It was very, very elegant, black. That blackness you don't see very well in these pictures. It's a skyscraper which doesn't have frivolous superficialities. No, it is what it is. It's a skyscraper. Here you have to imagine this as being black and not, you know, almost whitish or light gray. No, it's not like this. It's more like this, you know, and it's very elegant. A very elegant office tower. Again, this is not doing justice to the building. And we arrive at the light, although I am sorry I have only these pictures because I do like this building, but I don't have the right pictures and I apologize. And now we arrive at the last work, which was, you know, the construction began almost after he died and was finalized in 1969. And it's, I don't know if it's his work any longer. He is considered the author, but I think things change in the meantime. It doesn't look so alive as his initial sketch. You know, his initial sketch has even a neurosis about it, which I like. He was an emotional man, you can tell from the scribblings at the bottom, and he had a vision, but this vision was not truly respected in the final construction. But I guess this is the airport in Athens. So if you fly into Athens, you'll arrive here. Yeah, this is a problem with architecture, that it takes time, and sometimes, you know, buildings are completed after you are not alive any longer. And this is the last image of this presentation on Eero Saarinen, and I like this drawing very much. If he would have been able to build the airport as this sketch shows, it would have been a much more interesting building. But as you saw, between the building as it was built and this sketch is a very long distance. But I like very much the suggestions of this sketch.